It starts as something simple, something that no one ever really talks about after a certain age. But what if I told you that some of the most overlooked habits behind closed doors might be affecting your energy, your circulation, your relationships, and even your sleep more than you realize? My name is Dr. Edward, and I've spent the last 30 years working with thousands of older adults, men and women alike, helping them rediscover their vitality, their emotional intimacy, and yes, their sexual health in the years most people assume those things begin to fade. But what I've uncovered over those decades isn't just surprising, it's urgent, because while no one wants to talk about masturbation after 60, the truth is, it never really disappears. And when handled with care and understanding, it can be a source of relief, confidence, and connection with oneself. But when mishandled, especially in later years, it can quietly damage your physical health, your relationships, and your emotional balance in ways you might never expect. That's why today, I want to walk you through 5 common mistakes older adults make when it comes to masturbation. Mistakes that can silently chip away at your well-being. This isn't about shame. This isn't about judgment. It's about knowledge and kindness to your aging body. It's about listening to what your body has been trying to tell you, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in sudden fatigue, tension, or emotional fog. Every time you brush off something that didn't feel quite right. So take a breath, set aside what you've been told, or what you were never told at all. This conversation matters more than you think. And if you're still here, that tells me you're ready for the truth, delivered not with fear, but with care and dignity. Let's start with the first hidden mistake many seniors fall into, often without even knowing it. Too many older adults approach their body today the same way they did 20, 30, even 40 years ago. But your body has changed. Your hormones have shifted. Your nervous system reacts differently. Your skin, blood flow, and muscle response are no longer what they used to be. Yet the habit persists. Quick, rushed, almost mechanical, masturbation becomes a shortcut, not an act of care or mindfulness. And here lies the first mistake, treating the experience like an old habit, rather than learning how to reconnect with your body where it is now. Many seniors rush through it, using the same old physical movements, often with too much pressure or tension, never realizing how taxing that can be on aging nerves, joints, and even the pelvic floor. You may not feel the effects right away, but over time, the tension builds. The stiffness in the lower back, the tingling in the legs or genitals, the occasional numbness, these aren't random. They're signs of strain. In fact, I've had patients in their late 60s who thought they had early signs of neuropathy, only to discover it was the result of overly aggressive stimulation in a body that needed more care, not more force. And for men especially, prolonged tension in the perineal region can reduce blood flow and impair erectile function, not because of aging per se, but because of repeated microtrauma to already sensitive tissues. You see, the goal here isn't to stop, it's to slow down, to listen, to let go of the idea that satisfaction must come quickly or forcefully. Masturbation after 60 is a completely different terrain, one where gentleness restores what pressure has worn down. And when done right, it can improve sleep, calm anxiety, and boost confidence, but only if you stop treating your body like it's still 25. And while that alone is a powerful shift, it's often paired with the second mistake, one that's even more dangerous because it creeps into your mindset. It's the belief that pleasure at this age is something to hide or feel guilty about, that it's somehow shameful to desire connection, touch, or release in your 60s, 70s, or beyond. I cannot tell you how many of my patients, especially widows, divorced individuals, or those in caregiving roles, have quietly admitted that they feel wrong for wanting to feel good again. They worry what their children would think. They wonder if it's inappropriate. Some even fear it's sinful. And so, what could have been a healthy, healing experience becomes laced with guilt and self-reproach. That emotional stress shows up in the body, a racing heart, shallow breathing, tight chest, digestive upset, trouble sleeping. Shame is not just an emotion, it's a physiological burden. And when it wraps itself around something as intimate as self-touch, the body becomes confused. Instead of relaxing into release, it tightens. Instead of flowing with circulation, it constricts. I've seen men lose their natural urge for intimacy, not because they've aged out of it, but because they've buried it under layers of quiet shame. This is why I urge every older adult listening to this to reframe what intimacy means. Whether you're partnered or not, the need for connection doesn't die. And if anything, the older you get, the more you deserve to reconnect with your body in a way that honors it, not judges it. When you stop attaching shame to self-pleasure, your body responds in kind. Blood pressure stabilizes, sleep deepens, even memory and mood improve, because you've stopped sending your nervous system the message that something is wrong. If you're still with me, that tells me something beautiful. You haven't given up on yourself, and you shouldn't, because we're only just beginning. What I'll share next may surprise you even more. A mistake that doesn't come from action, but from avoidance. It's about the habit of turning to masturbation as a substitute for emotional needs you no longer feel safe asking for. We'll explore that quietly powerful shift, one that affects your health in ways both subtle and profound, in the next part of this journey. But before we move on, I want to say this. If what you're hearing resonates even a little, I invite you to share this video with someone who might need it, whether it's a friend, a sibling, or someone quietly suffering in silence. These conversations are rare, but they're needed more than ever. What if the real problem isn't what you're doing, but what you've been using it to escape from? In the next part, we'll talk about how loneliness, grief, and emotional hunger quietly shape one of the most common yet unspoken habits in senior life. There's a quiet kind of hunger that many people don't notice until much later in life. It's not the kind that makes your stomach growl. It's not even the kind that makes you cry. It's softer, more silent. It hides behind routines, polite conversations, and perfectly made beds. And it's one of the most overlooked forces behind the third mistake older adults often make when it comes to masturbation. Using it to fill emotional gaps that no one else seems to notice. It begins slowly. Maybe you've lost a spouse, or maybe you've been living alone for years. Maybe your children have grown up and moved on with lives of their own. Maybe you still see friends occasionally, but the depth of connection just isn't the same. And then there are those quiet evenings, the ones that stretch too long. When the television is on but nothing really sticks, that's when it happens. That small voice that says, maybe I just need to feel something, anything. And there's no shame in that. In fact, I want to say something now that may surprise you. Seeking comfort through touch, your own or someone else's, is profoundly human. It is not a flaw, but here's where the line blurs. When the act becomes a replacement, a stand-in, a coping mechanism not grounded in pleasure but in numbing. I've spoken to seniors who admitted they masturbate not out of desire, but out of boredom, out of restlessness, out of loneliness, out of habit. And here's what happens. The body, sensing no emotional nourishment, responds less and less over time. What used to bring relief now feels empty. The high fades quickly, and afterward, you're left feeling more alone than before. This pattern quietly rewires your brain's reward system. It teaches your nervous system to associate intimacy not with connection or peace, but with avoidance and withdrawal. This is where the danger lies. Because when masturbation becomes emotional escape, it loses its power to heal. It becomes something you do to feel less rather than something you do to feel more. And that emotional disconnection doesn't stay hidden. It affects your appetite, your sleep, your ability to concentrate, your memory, even your cardiovascular system, which depends more than we realize on emotional regulation and hormone balance. In one of my most difficult consultations, I remember an 82-year-old man named Charles, widowed for 17 years, living in a quiet suburb, always polite, always put together, but underneath, he was aching. He confessed that his days had grown empty, that even though his body still worked, he felt nothing anymore. Not during the act, not after, and he hated himself for it, not because he was doing it, but because he felt so emotionally numb and disconnected from the man he used to be. Someone who once loved, held, laughed, and cried deeply. So we worked together. We didn't start by talking about physical technique or hormones. We started with grief, with touch, with the idea that pleasure and sadness can live in the same body, and that neither needs to cancel the other out. We explored new ways for him to connect, not just to himself, but to others, through volunteering, through poetry, through music. Slowly, the numbness softened, and so did the act, he told me, with tears in his eyes. It feels real again. I feel real again. That's what I want for you, because the solution isn't to stop, it's to reconnect. Reconnect with the feelings beneath the surface, the longing, the grief, the hope, and to let those feelings guide your touch, not suppress it. When you do that, your body comes alive again. Blood flow improves, sleep deepens, the nervous system calms, and most importantly, the act becomes something sacred, something rooted in presence, not in absence. But there's another mistake many seniors make that adds fuel to this emotional disconnect: ignoring the role of the environment. You see, we think the body is everything, but the space around us shapes how our body feels, how it opens, and how it trusts. And too often, older adults create environments that feel rushed, cluttered, or emotionally cold during moments that are meant to be restorative. Picture this: you're in a dimly lit room, television humming in the background, surrounded by unopened mail and yesterday's dishes. Your mind is buzzing with unfinished tasks, and yet, this is where you try to relax. The body senses it. It tightens. It doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel wanted. And so the experience becomes mechanical, disconnected, forgettable. I always encourage my patients to create an intentional space, even if it's just 5 minutes. Light a candle, turn off the distractions, wrap yourself in something soft, close your eyes and take 5 slow breaths. Let the nervous system know this is a moment for presence, not escape. It makes a world of difference. Not because you've spiced things up, but because you've finally allowed your body to feel respected again. And when your body feels respected, it responds. Your circulation improves, your tension softens, your hormones stabilize, and slowly, that sense of aliveness returns, not just in your touch, but in your walk, your voice, your very presence. If you've made it this far, it tells me you're willing to meet yourself exactly where you are, not in the past, not in some ideal future, but now, with honesty and with care, and I admire that deeply. In the next section, we'll dive into something that catches many seniors off guard: how medications, even the ones you think are harmless, can slowly change how your body experiences pleasure and how to reclaim your sensitivity again. But before we go there, I want to gently ask, if this message touched something inside you, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. You never know whose life might soften just because you chose to open the door to this conversation. What if the pills you're taking every day, the ones you thought were helping, are quietly robbing you of the very connection you seek? In the next part, we'll talk about how medications after 60 can interfere with intimacy and how to restore balance naturally. You trust them, you're told they'll help. Maybe it's a small white pill in the morning or a few capsules before bed. Blood pressure, cholesterol, anxiety, sleep. There's a pill for everything. And while many of these medications play an important role in keeping your heart steady, your joints flexible, or your blood sugar balanced, what often gets lost in the conversation is what they quietly take away in return: your ability to feel, not just emotionally, but physically. One of the most overlooked mistakes I see among older adults is ignoring how their medications, especially when taken long-term, can interfere with sexual function, pleasure, and even your basic sensitivity to touch. And I'm not just talking about performance. I'm talking about the entire landscape of your sensory system, how your skin feels, how your nerves fire, how your brain interprets pleasure and safety and connection. Let me tell you a story about Harold. He was 73 when he came into my office, a retired history teacher with a calm voice and kind eyes. He had been on medication for high blood pressure for over 15 years. Recently, he noticed something he couldn't quite explain. Touch didn't feel the same, not just in his genitals, but across his body. Hugs felt distant. His favorite sweater didn't comfort him like it used to. And though he still had desire, the sensations felt muted. At first, he thought it was just age. Maybe his nerve endings were fading. Maybe this was just how things were supposed to go. But something didn't sit right. We looked deeper into his prescriptions, into his history, into how he felt emotionally. What we found was both frustrating and freeing. Several of his medications, while effective in lowering his blood pressure, were also known to reduce nerve sensitivity and suppress libido. No one had ever told him that, and he's not alone. Many common medications prescribed after 60, beta blockers, statins, antidepressants, antihistamines, and even some sleep aids can dull the body's natural signals for pleasure. They affect hormones, blood flow, and neurotransmitters in subtle ways that don't show up in your lab results, but they show up in your silence, your confusion, your slowly fading interest in connection. And because it happens gradually, most people don't even realize it's the pills. They blame their age. They blame themselves. But here's what I want you to know. It's not your fault. Your body is still capable. Your mind still longs for connection. But when chemistry is altered for long enough, the pathways that once felt alive grow quiet. And that quietness isn't permanent, but it needs your attention. The first step is awareness. Talk to your doctor, not just about your numbers, but about your quality of life, about what you feel, about what you no longer feel. You have the right to ask, could this medication be affecting my intimacy? You'd be surprised how often the answer is yes. And in many cases, there are alternatives. Medications with fewer sexual side effects, natural supports like magnesium, omega-3s, or adaptogenic herbs that may ease the burden your system carries. But medication is only one layer. Equally important is the way you treat your nervous system day to day. Because even if you can't change your prescriptions, you can change your internal chemistry through lifestyle, movement, breathwork, hydration, sunlight, and mindful touch. They all reawaken the body's natural pleasure pathways. I once guided a 68-year-old woman through a simple 5-minute breath and touch practice she did every morning before getting out of bed. No goal, no urgency, just presence. After a month, she told me she cried, not because she was sad, but because for the first time in years, her body felt like hers again. You see, medications may mute sensation, but they don't erase your right to feel. And feeling isn't something that only belongs to the young. In fact, the older you get, the more precious it becomes. And here's where the fourth mistake enters, one that surprises many: becoming dependent on artificial stimuli, like pornography or overly intense fantasies, to feel anything at all. It often starts innocently. You search for something stimulating, just a little help to get things going. But over time, the brain adapts. It demands more, stronger visuals, more intensity, faster pace, and before long, the gentle whispers of your own body are drowned out by noise. This is especially true for older adults who already feel the dimming effects of medication. In an attempt to override that numbness, they reach for something more intense, and it works for a while, but it comes with a price. The brain becomes less sensitive to subtlety. Real connection, whether with a partner or yourself, feels boring. The body, used to high stimulation, stops responding to anything softer. And soon, masturbation becomes more about chasing a sensation than about being present in one. I want to be clear. I'm not here to shame anyone for using tools that bring them comfort, but I do want you to notice the patterns. Are you feeling more alive or more empty afterward? Are you able to respond to your own breath, your own hand, your own warmth? Or do you feel frustrated when things aren't as intense as a screen can offer? When I work with patients, I often ask them to take a short break from all external stimulation. No visuals, no audio, just their breath and their body. The first few days feel strange, boring, even, but then something begins to shift. A new sensitivity emerges, a quiet joy, a soft recognition of aliveness that has nothing to do with performance and everything to do with connection. And that, in the end, is what this conversation is truly about. Not performance, not frequency, not rules, but connection to your body, to your emotions, to the life that still pulses quietly within you, waiting to be acknowledged. If you've listened this far, you're already halfway there, because it takes courage to face something that so many sweep under the rug. It takes tenderness to care for your body not as a machine, but as an old friend that still has stories to tell. In the next part, we'll explore the final and most heartbreaking mistake seniors often make, ignoring the deep link between self-touch and self-worth, and how rediscovering one can quietly transform the other. And if you're still watching, still reading, still breathing into this moment, I want to thank you. You are not broken. You are simply beginning again. What if your body has been trying to tell you you're still worthy of love, but you've been too distracted, ashamed, or tired to listen? In the final part, we'll talk about the forgotten connection between self-worth and touch, and how healing begins when you believe you still matter. Sometimes the hardest part isn't the silence. It's what that silence begins to say about you, not out loud, but underneath, the subtle message that maybe you don't matter the way you used to, that your body no longer deserves attention, that your needs are somehow less important now that you're older. This unspoken erosion of self-worth is, to me, the most damaging mistake of all when it comes to intimacy in later life. And it's not just about masturbation. It's about the story you tell yourself every time you undress without care, every time you look in the mirror and avert your gaze, every time you feel something stir within you but quickly shut it down because you think, not at this age. What breaks my heart isn't that seniors stop seeking pleasure. It's that many have convinced themselves they're no longer allowed to. They frame touch as something young people do, intimacy as something they've graduated from, and their bodies as something to endure, not embrace. And when that belief sets in, even self-touch becomes mechanical or disappears entirely. But here's what I need you to hear from me now, clearly and without hesitation. Your body is not less worthy just because it is older. Your skin is not less sacred. Your longing is not a mistake. If anything, every year you've lived has only deepened your right to pleasure, not diminished it. I remember a woman named Eleanor who came to me at 79, widowed twice. She had 3 children and 7 grandchildren. On the outside, she was radiant, silver hair tied neatly, voice gentle, eyes sharp. But when we spoke privately, she told me she hadn't allowed herself any form of self-touch in over a decade. Not because she didn't feel desire, but because somewhere along the way, she decided that touching herself would be undignified. She said, "I don't want my grandkids to think I'm some lonely old woman clinging to her past." I asked her, "What if you're not clinging to your past at all, but claiming a part of yourself that never stopped being alive?" That moment changed something. She started small, a warm bath with her favorite lavender oil, soft fabrics against her skin, music that made her sway, just a little, slowly. She began to explore her body again, not with shame, but with curiosity. And the change wasn't just physical. Her laughter came easier. Her sleep improved. She said her chest felt lighter, as if she could breathe in her own skin again. Because here's the secret no one tells you. Self-worth and self-touch are intertwined. When you care for your body, when you approach yourself with reverence rather than routine, something awakens. It's not about climax. It's not about how often. It's about how present you're willing to be with the parts of you that still crave kindness. Too many seniors mistake absence for discipline. They think that by denying themselves touch, they're being strong or respectable. But what if strength looks more like softness? What if dignity includes pleasure? What if true respect for yourself means honoring all the ways your body speaks, not just the ones society deems appropriate? It's not easy. I know that. I've worked with war veterans who haven't cried in 50 years, with grandmothers who were taught their whole lives to put others first, with caregivers who pour every ounce of energy into someone else's comfort, but leave none for themselves. And I've seen what happens when they finally come home to themselves. There's no fireworks, no dramatic breakthrough, just a quiet return, a gentle, "Oh, there you are. You are still here. You are still worthy." And your touch, your own, loving touch is not something to be ashamed of. It's a language, a prayer, a remembering. So if you're sitting in a quiet room, reading this, unsure of where to start, begin here. Place your hand over your heart. Feel it, not just the beat, but the presence. Let your breath slow down. Notice the rise and fall of your chest. That's not just oxygen, that's life. That's you. And from there, ask yourself, not with urgency, not with guilt, what would feel good right now? Not what you're supposed to do, not what you used to do, but what would feel honest, kind, and present in this version of your body. Because pleasure is not a performance, it's a relationship. And at this age, it deserves to be slow, soulful, and sacred. You've survived decades. You've loved and lost. You've built things and let things go. You've endured change in every form. Isn't it time you soften back into yourself, not as a duty, but as a gift? This isn't about fixing what's broken. You are not broken. This is about finally choosing to feel what's still alive and trusting that it's enough. As we reach the end of this journey, I hope you walk away with something deeper than advice. I hope you walk away with permission, not from me, but from yourself. Permission to touch, permission to rest, permission to matter. And if this video spoke to something in you, something fragile and long buried, I ask only this: pass it on, not because it's polished or perfect, but because there's someone else, maybe down the hall, maybe across the country, who's been waiting years to hear that their body still belongs to them. You could be the reason they remember. Stay with me for just a moment longer, because in our final words, I'll leave you with a message not just from a doctor, but from someone who's walked beside thousands of seniors rediscovering their worth. You'll understand why this matters more than ever before. So here we are. Maybe you started this video with a bit of hesitation. Maybe the title made you pause, your finger hovering over the screen, unsure if this was really for you, but something in you clicked. Something whispered, "Just listen." And you did, through discomfort, through memories, through reflections you hadn't visited in years. You stayed with me, with yourself. That matters more than you know, because what we've talked about today isn't just about physical habits or medical advice. It's about reclaiming something that too often gets left behind in the aging process. The quiet dignity of being human, fully, sensually, emotionally, even spiritually. I've spent my life as a doctor, yes, but also as a witness. I've sat across from men who wept because they no longer felt like men. I've listened to women whisper through tears that they miss the feeling of being wanted, not by someone else, but by themselves. I've spoken with couples who hadn't touched in years, thinking it was just what happens in old age. I've seen the ache, the shame, the loss, but I've also seen what happens when that shame lifts. When someone decides, even timidly, to try again, to soften, to breathe, to touch, to believe they are still worthy of pleasure and presence. And let me tell you something, every single time, it is beautiful, because the truth is, your body is not done. Your desire is not done. You are not done. Maybe you've made some of these mistakes. Maybe you've been rough with yourself, or rushed, or numb, or ashamed. Maybe you've leaned too much on fantasy or ignored what your medications have taken from you. Maybe you've told yourself it's too late. But tonight, as you lie down, maybe in a familiar bed with familiar aches, I want you to remember this. There is no shame in coming home to yourself, not through guilt, not through discipline, but through gentleness. Start small, a longer breath, a kind thought, a warm hand on your belly. Let the noise fade. Let the body remember. And when you do, don't be surprised if something stirs. It won't be dramatic. It won't shout. It will whisper, "Welcome back." That's your body speaking. That's your self-worth rising. And that's the real message I came to give. Before we part, I want to thank you for your courage, your curiosity, and your trust. I know how hard it can be to listen to topics the world has told you to forget. I know how deep the silence can be, how heavy the years can feel. But I also know this. In every senior I've met who chose to reconnect with their body, I've seen something remarkable. Not just health, not just comfort, but joy. And that joy, it's still available to you. Not because you've earned it, not because you've followed every rule, but simply because you're still here. So if this message has meant something to you, share it. Not for the views, not for the algorithm, but for the person you know who might be sitting quietly in their own kind of ache, waiting for someone to tell them they still matter. Be that someone. And if you haven't already, I invite you to subscribe so you don't miss the next conversation, because there's so much more to explore. And I promise to keep showing up here, walking beside you, every step of the way. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. You've come so far, and you are not alone.